I think taking a technology like this, which is going to be absolutely earth-shaking, it's going to be the most revolutionary change in humanity that we've ever faced, and isolating that in the hands of very few people in a very opaque way is extremely high risk. And a lot of people view it as extreme, but I firmly believe that the future of humanity is meaningfully dependent upon AI being open sourced.
Welcome to AI Catch Up, the podcast catching up with the tech products that matter in the AI era.
Hi everyone, and welcome to the AI Catch Up podcast. My name is Elina, and today I'm joined by the visionary in the open source space, Mike Bird. He has been working in the technical community of OpenInterpreter. He is also running several successful YouTube channels on tool use, and he's a very big advocate for open source movement, and that is why today in the show we are diving deep into how exactly and what should we learn from the open source. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Really happy to be here.
Would you actually brief us on where you're currently standing and how your journey in the AI space has started and what excites you by now?
Absolutely. So my career journey was a bit of a fun path, but I got into software in 2015 and worked through a few different industries before the ChatGPT moment, which was really the click for me. I'd spent the previous year working in robotics software, which was really cool, but I thrive on the application layer. And when ChatGPT came out, I saw it as kind of the next evolution of how we're going to interact with computers, interact with building software. And I got obsessed where every day I would either read something, watch something, learn something, and compounding that over years, you just get very much embedded into an ecosystem. The first piece of technical content I ever made was for encouraging people to just try ChatGPT because it felt like this secret, even though it just proliferated very quickly. There was still a lot of hesitation for adoption just because people aren't exposed to it. I actually just the other day went to someone and was talking about ChatGPT, like, so what is that? I'm like, oh man, we're in this bubble, but it's just
we are.
But it's part of what I'm doing with these YouTube channels is try to spread it to more people because I would really like to democratize the ability for people to benefit from this type of technology. So I've always been a proponent of open source, made my first contribution years ago, but getting into the AI community, there are tons of brilliant people doing a lot of really innovative things. So just being able to have those conversations and learn a bunch, I very quickly realized that this is something that we as a society need to focus a lot of our energy on. The job with OpenInterpreter was a dream come true. It was one of the coolest projects at the time, and I was able to just build with it, teach people about it, and help proliferate that to more people. So I've been super fortunate getting to where I am and started the podcast Tool Use about a year ago. It's been awesome being able to talk to people way smarter than me, the researchers, the entrepreneurs, the builders who are on the cutting edge of what's going on, and just trying to use it as a megaphone to bring that more to people. And then on my personal side, building little demos and trying new tools and seeing what works to try to enhance my efficiency and work a lot more effectively.
You, Mike, are definitely one of the people with a very, very constant spark in your eyes when it comes to probably each and every tool that I'm aware of. And closer to the end of our episode, I would also like to challenge the idea of us all learning about AI and how that can impact the society. Stay tuned. I would also be willing to look into how exactly the open source community and technical feedback is bringing the benefit for certain products existing. Where do you see this going, taking into account that companies right now might feel that they have less mode than before, and the community motion is something that should be reviewed and added to the strategies of the companies?
Yeah, so I'm by no means a purist. I fully understand the competitive advantage to keeping some software proprietary. You got to keep your secret sauce secret to keep that edge. But open source is very much a public good. When you contribute to open source, you're able to slightly enhance the collective capability of humanity via software. Everyone that interacts with the digital world today is benefiting from open source, whether it's the Linux systems that power the servers or the stack used to build the different services we interact with. There's always going to be benefit that's derived from it. Now, for companies, a lot of the times they view it as, oh, by putting things out in the open, I'm giving my competitors the advantage that we spent time working on. I'm going to reveal some things that I don't necessarily want to reveal. But there's good strategies around it where you allow things to be viewed in the open. You're able to establish more trust with people. In this age of AI, people are becoming a lot more skeptical of their digital experiences. We cannot trust the videos we see. We cannot trust the pictures we see. We cannot trust the people we're interacting with are really people anymore. So people are craving transparency. They're craving trust. And open source is a valuable contributor to that. There are some companies where they will open source a library or an artifact of their offering. So the users are able to audit that without necessarily seeing the background process. One example, AgentStack from Agency. They do tracing to help you build more reliable systems. All of their big brain processing and the analytics are done behind closed doors, so they get to keep their competitive advantage. But the actual integration that you put into your software is open. So you're able to audit to make sure no fishy stuff is being sent that you don't consent to. And it's allowing them to have a big competitive advantage with their internal processes while still developing the trust. It also helps with your reputation. So a lot of developers align with the view that contributing to open source is a net positive for society. And similar to Meta's strategy of open sourcing Llama to try to attract more researchers, because researchers want the research to be open more often than not, with software companies, by building tooling out in the open, you're able to attract the developers in the open source community towards your principled approach. So there is a business justification for open sourcing a portion of your offering, if not the whole thing. For example, I use cal.com for my booking. I think it's just better than Calendly through and through, but cal.com is open sourced it, so you're able to audit it, tweak it if you want. But the reason they don't have a direct competitor that just takes it and runs with it is there's so much more to running a good scheduling software than just the code that operates. Having an open mind towards open source to explore the benefits of establishing trust, interacting with a larger community, and just getting the goodwill that comes with it, a lot of the time will offset any perceived competitive advantage of keeping everything secret. So always happy to talk to people who are kind of on the fence about what they should and shouldn't open source, because it's good for everyone. And including if you support people in peripheral technologies, there could be complementary benefits. So I think everyone should explore it at least a little bit.
Let's actually dive deeper into one of the examples. What things would you recommend developers and business side to take into consideration and understand what parts to actually bring to open source? Probably expecting contributions, expecting feedback, expecting that that part would be having easier audit and will be going through compliance requirement easier. What are these things to consider?
Every situation is going to be different. And I also want people to keep in mind that they don't necessarily have to open source their product. They can contribute to open source libraries that they're leveraging. So my very first contribution to open source, I was using a library in Go and had a version conflict with other libraries that I was using in the project. All I did was go online, clone down the repo, make some updates to it, push it up. It was easier for the maintainer than me just opening up an issue and asking them to do it. I was able to get the result I wanted. Then all of a sudden, everyone else that used this library got the same result. So you don't necessarily have to reveal your internal secrets with open source. You can just contribute to the ecosystem as a whole and still get a lot of that benefits. You'll browse GitHub in a lot of big projects. You'll see sponsored by so-and-so corporation. And a lot of the times what that is people acknowledging that the maintainers of these open source projects are sometimes undercompensated, sometimes underappreciated, and giving them the support they need to continue their work. And that could be financial, which a lot of big companies opt for, which, it's a marketing strategy, which I'm aligned with, because you're getting a benefit rather than just throwing up an ad on a podcast. But you're also getting the benefits of better technology existing in the world. So I don't encourage people to open source things that are they're processing the algorithms they developed over time to help optimize their user experience, because that's your proprietary thing. You deserve to benefit from the work you put into that. But anything that's generic, if you're trying to write your own, metrics or web server, something very generic that's not specific to your tool, by open sourcing it, you're getting more developers contributing to it, and you're still providing the benefit to other projects or organizations, but you're getting the collective intelligence of the open source community to kind of come in, give their efforts, poke holes in it. A lot of the times you'll get these Linux bugs that get reported and very serious vulnerabilities that went unnoticed for years. The XY one is super interesting because it was actually just a very dedicated developer noticed a difference in latency and dove a bit deeper and found malicious code. This type of thing would not exist if it wasn't for being open source. Like the amount of bugs in Windows and Mac, we won't know because it's not publicly reported. They want to keep everything locked in. But Linux, you can really just dive in and get deep analysis of how the code is functioning, which just provides a lot more trust to the user because they know that the world of technical auditors have the ability to see the code and identify issues. So you're going to establish more trust if you open up portions of your code, but don't feel obligated to open source your project if you can contribute to the open source in general.
That is a very interesting view. So if it contains proprietary information, can remain proprietary, and we are all okay with that. But when it comes to something more common also to be done in other companies, that is something to open source. I think there are common examples of Spotify or Netflix doing that, and then their open source repositories getting lots of contributions because the developers indeed share very, very valuable things that actually support the core business, and at the same time potentially also attract talent to those companies when it comes to development effort. I really like this. And when it comes to the, well, a bit more problematic parts of open source, we have seen the example of WormGPT back 2 years ago, I believe. So when the criminals were indeed using GPTJ. So luckily not the most powerful model for malicious purposes. Last year in San Francisco, I remember the research scientists from Meta being on the stage and describing different things when it comes to their process from Llama 3 to Llama 4, but then never touching upon the ideas behind what they feel like if the Llama 4 will get as powerful as they were predicting back then, and it being used for malicious purposes. Do you have a certain recommendation for the main administrators of open source repositories to try to track that, observe the things that can be problematic?
Well, I get a little bit philosophical with this one. So I view open source as a net positive across the board. A lot of people who align with my beliefs will use examples like open source AI is a tool like any other tool. It can be used for good or evil. Okay. Another argument people make is if people use open source AI in malicious or bad ways, it's more easy to develop defenses to that with the open source technology. But I think the problem with both of those and the argument against open source in general is it is only looking at first order effects. So the idea of a bad person doing a bad thing with open source AI. And that's a real threat. There's no denying that bad people will do bad things, and this technology is becoming so powerful that it could enable some malicious actors. However, looking at the second order effects, if you were to extrapolate the opposition to open source AI, it's consolidating the power that comes with AI in the hands of a very small group of people at an even smaller group of organizations. Now, the problem with that is, regardless of how well-intentioned and altruistic these organizations are currently, who's to say that extrapolating down the road, their successors will maintain the same morals and ethics? How do you align these models with the ethics across all societies? Because AI will have a global impact when ethics and morals have a spectrum across societies. Where do we gauge where proper alignment is? Who gets to be the arbiters of that? What is the risk of corruption or alternate incentives which do not align with the best use of humanity? I think taking a technology like this, which is going to be absolutely earth-shaking, it's going to be the most revolutionary change in humanity that we've ever faced, and isolating that in the hands of very few people in a very opaque way is extremely high risk. And when I say high risk, it'll still be under 1% of something bad happening, but that 1% chance of risk affecting 8 billion people is astronomical. And by allowing open source to proliferate, we're allowing the possibility of a future where 1 million AGIs could exist in the world, keeping each other in check because they're not able to grab as much market share as possible. If you look at the history of human institutions, human cultures, over time, they calcify, they degrade, and they die. It's an inevitable process. Things have to stay agile, they have to stay innovative, they have to adapt for the current times. If something gets too centralized, it will become corrupt over time. And with AI, the consequences of that can be dire. So even though there is a risk that bad people can do bad things in the current day with this technology, the overall risk assessment for humanity obligates us to promote open source. And a lot of people view it as extreme, but I firmly believe that the future of humanity is meaningfully dependent upon AI being open sourced. Because if there is a two-tiered system, the chance of human society as a whole falling out of homeostasis into an irreparable state is non-zero. And even though open source AI isn't necessarily the cure, it will mitigate a lot of these risks and there will be some consequences. But I firmly believe in the capability of humanity to overcome other challenges when the power that AI brings is distributed and decentralized amongst all people.
That's a very beautiful and strong statement, which sometimes is way more helpful than just being on the plus and minus side at the same time. And I do really appreciate you for an opinion. And at the same time, bringing me to thinking that this closed source or open source position is even comparable to general democratic versus autocratic society movement. And at the same time, we are building our rules now, so we will see what direction it will go.
Yeah, and just being able to play my real small part in trying to nudge things the way that I view as more have an increased likelihood of success is extremely rewarding. And I hope that people who align with the perspective also put some sweat equity into making it happen, because you don't need to dedicate your life to open source. You don't need to make your career around open source. But if you can just make a small contribution, a little promotion, use a tool like Bitwarden instead of OnePass, it's going to nudge us in the right direction. So I really hope people contemplate the way that they use technology, and builders of technology take into account the future of society and what we are actually capable of down the road.
This last sentence of yours, Elina has gotten the motivation to actually review the code base of Bitwarden that I have been using for some time to consider contributing something.
Ooh, and on that note, what I've learned and what a lot of people I hope consider is you can use Cursor as a learning tool. It's not just a development tool. If you pull down a repo and allow Cursor to index it, you can start asking questions. How does feature X work? Where can I find aspect Y of the code base? And you're able to learn it more deeply, and then you can make a meaningful contribution instead of just like getting overwhelmed with this like 50,000 line code base and you just don't know how things work. Cursor is phenomenal as an education tool. So if you just go on GitHub, clone down the repo, open in Cursor, you can just chat with it. You don't have to write a single line of code, but you'll get a better understanding of the software as it's used. And then you can kind of go back and forth and be like, I would really like if it did this. Or for me, Bitwarden's been having an issue with the fingerprint scanner on Mac. It just doesn't unlock it. I have to type in my password. So I'm going to open up an issue, maybe or may not to get to it. But if you dive into the code, you can be like, all right, what is the mechanism that's not being triggered properly? And Cursor may actually help you debug it.
Wow. This advice of yours will definitely need to get into books. I love it. The conversation on the open source will probably not be accomplished if we don't open the topic of OpenAI switching their policy from being open sourced and now going into closed sourced. Well, we are in summer 2025. We all expect GPT, right? At the same time, something that I'm commonly hearing in the space is that OpenAI is only doing closed source. Why? That would be so much better if that would be open sourcing the models at the same time. For me personally, learning from OpenAI GitHub repositories was extremely, extremely helpful. And their contribution was, well, GPT 3.5 wasn't the first one, right? So the previous one were indeed open source. What is your sentiment? What is your feeling on why the board and the leadership of OpenAI has decided to go for that?
Yeah, it's disappointing, not necessarily unexpected. When some of the emails got released around how their risk assessment was that by open sourcing things, it would increase risk in the world. And similar to what I alluded to earlier, first order effects, that's an understandable point of view. I feel that the people at open source are so smart and blow my analytical abilities out of the water that it would be surprising to me if they didn't consider the effects on society. I think that in their risk assessment and their feelings of being moral beings, they view themselves as capable of being these arbiters of this capability. And they don't trust us normies with being able to handle such technology. If you look back to, I think it was GPT-2, might have been 3, where they released a press statement saying, we're unsure if we're going to release this model because it's just too scary. Like it's going to have too much impact. And you look at it now and it's laughable, the output. But how much of that was marketing? How much of it is the attempt at regulatory capture? It's very difficult to get inside of the mind of someone like the leadership of OpenAI, because in order to get to that position, you have to be very ambitious. You have to be very bright. And where are the incentives and do they align with everyone? OpenAI is coming out with an open source model at some point. It's been postponed. I firmly believe they're still going to do it. anytime an organization of their capability releases something open source, it should be applauded. It's awesome that they're getting back into their open source roots and giving us something. Whether it's open weights or open source is another discussion. I'm very skeptical they're going to release any data along with it. OpenAI used to come out with such phenomenal papers. It's very disappointing that all of this incredible research capability is being locked in a walled garden and we're not going to be able to get access to it. I get a competitive advantage. They have a lot of investors rooting for them who need to make a lot of money. Misaligned incentives are a thing. A lot of people are framing it around like open washing, I guess could be a term to use, where they're trying to improve their reputation by associating with open source again, because it's been one of the biggest critiques about them. I don't necessarily view that as a bad thing. The motivation is almost irrelevant as long as the result is what you want. I don't think they're going to open source the data, which is extremely disappointing. There's a company, I'm actually not sure if they're around anymore, called LLM360. They came out with a data set called TXT360, which is a 15 trillion token set. But not only did they release the data, but they released all of the processes for doing the dedupe, the tooling they made. It was just a really awesome initiative. Didn't get enough attention. But one of the challenges with open source is not necessarily just the models, but the entire pipeline of training, developing, deploying, using inference. So there's so much more need in the supporting infrastructure. So if OpenAI were to open source data sets, chef's kiss, that'd be phenomenal. If they were to open source tooling for how they manage their data pipelines and data collection, how much did they really scrape? I think we all remember Mira's answer towards, does the Sora model use YouTube data for training? And just had that really cringy look. I think they have a financial incentive to not release a lot of things. So I don't know. I'm disappointed in the direction, but the open source AI community is so much larger than OpenAI. There's so much more diverse viewpoints because everyone gets to follow their passion and work on specific aspects, that once open source solves the collaboration and the consolidation problem, so not everyone's rowing in different directions, but there's more of a streamlined approach to solving these issues, I firmly believe that open source is going to be a viable competitor to it. We're just too scattered right now.
Well, directing open source towards certain goal is one of the most complicated tasks that LangChain is facing. With them still, in my opinion, being the leading AI agentic framework, the direction as you're describing it won't be the worst thing. But now that we started thinking about agentic functionality, what is your feeling? Will it be dominated by open source frameworks? Will there be a stronger leader in closed source once we finally manage to define what AI agent looks like? If we are going into the application layers, the agentic functionality will be closed sourced. Is it also something that you're observing? Or would you say that it will be won by the open source?
The adoption of the agents, of AI agents, I feel is going to be directly proportional to their capabilities. I don't view trust, privacy, and security as a meaningful factor in the decision on tools you make for the majority of people. I think people want to turn on their computer and have it do what they want it to do. And the challenge with open source there is you lose a lot of the arguments towards your service around the morality, because most people don't care. I know that's not everyone's opinion, but I firmly believe if you look at the amount of people that use closed source proprietary technology now, they don't care. They just want to get the results. So it puts a big pressure on open source because they don't have the funding, support, resources to compete with things like user experience. If you talk to people who use Linux, especially something like Arch, where it's just updated so frequently that people need to be technically savvy to keep up with it, most people don't want to deal with that. They want to turn on their computer, check their YouTube, check email, and then just go about their day. So it puts a lot of pressure on open source to not only develop out in the open, whether it's on your own or with the help of others, but give an experience that's as good or better than proprietary closed source. And I do view AI tooling as an ability to lower the level of difficulty required to achieve this. You'll get tools like Lovable, Bolt, V0, where you can spin up a front end very easily that looks good. And then there will be more agents developed that can kind of tweak things. I view the issue with proprietary, not necessarily the issue, the competitive advantage to proprietary is they have the financial incentive and they have a lot of financial resources right now. There is so much discussion about how the world of VC is struggling right now, except for AI. Tons of cash being dumped into AI, insane valuations, just so much is being put towards accomplishing the goal of being the winner in the space because everyone views it as an all-out sprint to the finish line. If you look at the hustle and grind culture in SF, everyone working towards these goals realizes that if they are slow, they will not make it in time. And you don't necessarily need first mover advantage, but if you're too slow, you're not going to get the market share you want. You're not going to get the traction you need. Also, difficulty with all the noise in the ecosystem. There's never been a fast moving industry, and everyone's shouting about their product, their service, their offering, where you really to think strategically about how you promote it, giving another layer of difficulty for open source, because not only do you need a good product, a good UI, but you need good marketing in order to get there, where if you as an individual builder just want to build, you're missing out on a lot of things. But AI will fill the gap in a lot of these. And one area that I've actually found success in is just introducing people to other people. I recently talked to Evan Armstrong, who made Augment Toolkit, which is a really cool project for being able to create your own fine-tuned models, which I think is extremely important. I think people being able to take their own data, upload their data to a folder, and then have a tool run and then spit out a model the other side is incredible. I also talked to Ali, who runs Transformer Lab, which is a really cool service that does something similar. On your local machine, you can fine-tune a model very easily. These two guys didn't know each other existed. So by having them talk, all of a sudden you're saying, where can we collaborate? Where can we kind of push the general trend forward? Combine our resources, have someone with a slightly larger microphone to enhance the messaging to reach more people, just to encourage more people to be exploring and investigating it. Because if one ambitious developer can get enhanced with open source tooling and they want to contribute to open source, all of a sudden their product becomes a little bit better and they have a higher likelihood of succeeding. So pulling this all back to agents, people just want results. And right now, even the leading AI labs don't do a very good job with it. I don't know people that use Operator in their day-to-day life. There's a lot of web automations like browser-based just came out with Director AI. Lang-based came out with chai.new, and they're just trying to move things forward, but we haven't seen that mass adoption because it's still just not quite there. We're getting very close, and unknown factor right now is, will it be winner takes all, which I think is unlikely, or will it be a vast, rich ecosystem of a bunch of different tools that are hyper specialized to specific tasks, which I think is much more likely to occur. And of those tools, which ones can open source penetrate, take advantage of, or take dominance of, and then try to work outwards from there.
Yep. Would also probably not expect any agent leader for now. There is not much reason for that. We are all in the rather comparable understanding. And only the very, very specific understanding could bring you certain competitive advantage that would bring you to the first mover, but we will see. Thank you so much for connecting the people in the space. I do think that it is very important and should be done, because I see so many builders being very deep in the grinding culture and trying to be fast, while also not connecting with others, even though their effort could have been reduced and the synergies could have arisen. So thanks a lot for that. And I think that I'm asking rather commonly, like, what is the favorite tool of yours? What is the favorite model of someone? How exactly do you apply AI to your daily life? What is your favorite use case? What is your favorite automation? But for you, I have even the question one level above. I believe that you're having different tools, and probably your day is surrounded by different use cases where you are applying AI. Would you be able to describe 3 use cases that you see very helpful for yourself when it comes to using tools in your daily life?
Yes, absolutely. So I work from home, so having a voice transcription tool has been astronomically helpful. I realize that it's not appropriate for every situation and not everyone gets the same benefit, but I do 90% plus of my prompting via voice. It uses a different part of my brain. I'm able to just kind of dump a whole lot instead of being very meticulous with my typing. And the ability to prompt with either voice or typing and altering between the two will give you different results. So I can just kind of talk to my computer. And then using tools like Open Interpreter, I'm not only able to dictate and transcribe certain text, but I'm actually able to initiate actions. So having voice as my input massively increases the bandwidth. I don't use voice output, like my computer doesn't talk back to me, because I view reading as much higher bandwidth consumption of information. A lot of the times, if you have a video to watch or you can just read the transcript, you can get through the transcript much faster. So I much prefer to do voice in, text out, and I use Super Whisper for that. There are tools like Whisperfile, which is from or sponsored by Mozilla. Justine Tunney did Llamaphile, and CJ Pies integrated that into Whisper. So it's very important for people to at least explore different modalities, because you don't know the best way that you can interact with a computer, because we've been forced into a certain way of interacting with computers. voice transcription is huge for me. The second is the ability to build tools that make tools. So I made a tool called the Obsidian plugin generator. I use Obsidian for my notes, the principle of file over app, where instead of being locked into an app's ecosystem, you use an app to operate over a certain set of universally accepted files, in this case, Markdown, is very aligned with my principles, because as soon as Obsidian no longer provides me value, I can leave Obsidian and keep all my data. When I used to work with Notion, exporting all your data from Notion is a garbage file that you cannot import to a new vault. It was just so frustrating. So Obsidian is very much a use our tool as long as you find value in it. If not, everything is yours. It's awesome. And it's not even open source, but it's a really cool product. So one of the other powerful aspects of Obsidian is the ability to use plugins, where you can take your note app and add this extra functionality to it. So I open sourced the project Obsidian Plugin Generator, where you have a quick conversation with your machine. It'll ask you 3 questions as to what plugin you want, what functionality you're looking for, what are the edge cases, how do you want to interact with it? And then it'll spit out a plugin. And 90% of the time, as long as it's not an overly complex thing, it works right off the bat. You might need a little bit of coding, but open in Cursor, you can get it resolved pretty quickly. So now with my Obsidian Vault, I'm able to look at any inefficiency in my workflow, generate a plugin to do that. So for example, when I have a new tool use episode, I can just open the command palette, new tool use episode. It will auto-generate all the files I need. And when the episode's recorded, I hit another command. It actually takes the transcript and the subtitles from that episode, and then it'll feed it through AI pipelines to output different assets. So things like the title options, the description, the timestamp, all of that is just a single command in Obsidian now. And it's, it saves me minutes. It's not like it's an astronomical change, but it reduces human error and it reduces the amount of cognitive switching I have to do. So if people investigate aspects of their workflow, which could potentially be automated, take one step back and see, is there a system you can build or use online that will help you create these tools more quickly, where you don't have to, do a big back and forth session with Cursor to try to output a certain Python script to accomplish something? Can you make a script generator? And that's been incredibly powerful. And a third one would be probably Cursor. Cursor was the last annual subscription I ever bought. A year ago, I'm like, I love Cursor. I'm all in. Let's do the year, save 20%. I will no longer do an annual subscription for any service anymore. The rate of change is so fast, and the requirement of staying agile and flexible is so much more important than it used to be, that, pay a monthly subscription, get the pro plan, get the best technology that's available to you. But by locking in for a period of time, I found even though when my annual plan subscriber expires, I'm still going to stick with Cursor. But I had this internal apprehension to trying things like Windsurf, Claude Code, Codex, because I was already paying for Cursor. So I was locked in mentally. But now that I'm a free agent, I can go anywhere I want. I'm more likely to experiment against these different tools and see what works. So me and young Flo are both doing projects in Claude Code, and we're going to swap notes just to be like, how did we find using this compared to these other tools? And find your community, find people you can talk to about comparing use cases and what worked, what didn't. Ray Fernando is a phenomenal content creator, does a lot of live streams around different tools, how he uses them, and the capabilities of each of them. Because as it evolves so quickly, we got to push the boundaries, see what works and what doesn't. So how you interact with the computer, how you make the tools that you want to use, and something that helps you interface with code in a more approachable way are the 3 things that I use the most, and I hope other people do too.
Great, thanks. Great use cases. Whether I should also ask you about any MCP servers that is running.
MCP has yet to really integrate into my workflow sufficiently. I've played with it. I see a lot of promise in it. One tool, which I encourage more people to check out, is called ToolHive by StackLock. And what it does is it allows more secure secret management, because everything runs in Docker containers and they harden the servers. Because my big concern with MCP servers is similar to my concern with package managers back in the day. There were a few packages on NPM which either had malicious code in it, or there was one, I think it was called Pad Left back in the day, where there was a whole bunch of drama. This guy who's developer Pad Left took it out and it caused NPM to crash. All these packages that relied on it were having issues. And it was just too much abstraction away from people to understand what's going on. So with MCP servers, being able to just write a 5-line thing saying import from this URL, it's very easy for people to have what appears to be authentic MCP servers that are really exfiltrating your data to a malicious source. So people are just using these tools without really doing the investigation required to see what is safe and what's not. The vast majority of MCP servers are legit, but there are a small portion that's not. And if you're not adequately investigating the tools that you're using, you don't know what the downstream effects are. So tools like ToolHive, you're able to use a collection of MCP servers that are very tightly not monitored, but like hardened and evaluated. And you're going to get what you're looking to get out of it rather than just going to this opaque, import from X. So I am bullish on MCP servers in general as a standardized way to expose data in a safe way. I think we're so early that the implementation's not totally finished yet. For example, the only clients I've used are Claude Desktop and Cursor. We need way more clients. We need the ability for people to get trusted MCP servers. So I personally have not found an optimal workflow where it really feeds into it well, but I'm aware that a lot of people do. And I encourage more people to try because you don't know what's going to work for you if you don't experiment with it.
Yeah, we are including a lot of links into the show notes from the tools that you have recommended because they are definitely worth trying. And the general topic of security and authentication as well as authorization in MCP is also something that is disturbing to me. That is why I would be personally very happy to look into what ToolHive is doing in more detail. Mike, is there something for the end of our episode that you would love to leave our listeners with when it comes to the tools that they are using in the AI space?
Yes. There's a few principles that I really hope a lot of people start applying to the way that they interface with compute. The world is going to change way more than most people realize. It's a little bit scary, very exhilarating, and the necessity to keep an open mind is very important. We're going to enter an age where change has never happened as quickly as it's going to happen. There will be trepidation towards adopting it, some hesitation around which path to take. So an open mind is going to be extremely important. What I think is the most important thing is for people to maintain curiosity, try new tools, push the boundaries, see what's possible, because you're going to get people trying to push and pull you in different directions, share their experience, share their opinion without knowing what their incentives are. Like you can tell, listening to me, I'm always going to bias towards the open source alternative. And that might not be the correct tool for people in a given situation. So you want to explore, be curious, experiment, play, have fun with it. We're entering a miraculous age when computers will understand natural language and be able to act upon it. It's truly mind-blowing what we've done. It's just we've been in the slow boil of having this come through the internet, then mobile computing, and now AI. But really, if you look back 20 years to what we have now, it's crazy. And when people ask me, what's your 5-year prediction? Cannot do. There's so many potential variables that it's just so difficult to predict where things are going. The next is when you're working with AI systems or building AI systems, keep in mind human in the loop. It's very important that trust is established with these systems, whether it's a tool you're building or a tool you're using. And if you allow an AI system to fully run by itself, you don't know what's happening a lot of the time. It might share visibility, it might not, but it might make decisions you disagree with, and then it might get a little panicky, and then you start to lose confidence in these systems. But if between every meaningful step of the process, and these steps can be one single step to accomplish a goal, if you involve a human, it increases the feeling of collaboration, augmentation, rather than replacement. And that's what we want AI to be. We want AI to continue to be a tool to help augment people to achieve their best work and satisfaction in life and all of these good things. So keeping that process in mind about where people's skepticism and trepidation lie and try to include them with the workflows. Some people say, I just want to hit play and have the whole thing go. And the appeal to having like a little worker do everything in the background is definitely there. But I think it's missing the point that people want to have these things be tools and be a part of them and to be involved with the process. So I think that's very important. Another thing is develop good taste. There is the 3 attributes that can be very important moving forward are curiosity, agency, and taste. And I view developing good taste as conscious experience and practice, where you pay attention to things like how does it make you feel? How does using a certain tool not just accomplish a goal, but what does the process feel like? When you go to a website that is just an awesome website, what is it about it that you enjoy? What's a good user experience to you? And when you're building these projects, whether it's a tool you want to give to people or just something for yourself, keep that in mind. Like, how does the feeling impact you as well? Because that's going to be a much bigger part of interacting with technology than it has been in the past, when it's much more practical and utility based. The future of compute is going to be such a heavy part of our lives that we want to move away from this social media influenced dopamine hacking, attention grabbing optimization towards enhancing the human experience. So stay curious, keep humans involved with the process, and have some good taste. Pay attention to how you interact with computers.
Loving this last word of yours, Mike, and thank you so much for your time. It has been impressive.
Thank you for having me. This has been a blast. I love talking about it.
AI catch up brings the news. Tech solutions users can't refuse.